Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this film we're going to look at the last, at least one of the last films directed by the genius, Jim Henson. If you're not familiar with him, you are probably familiar with Kermit the Frog. That's his creation. His Creature Shop was known for practical special effects for years and is still running. Densely, his creations were, you had the entire Muppets, you had a lot of the puppets from Fraggle Rock, or all of the puppets from Fraggle Rock. The original puppets you'll find in Sesame Street, along with dozens of others. He was known for his practical effects and his creatures. Unfortunately, this film did not do very well in theaters. It was a box office disappointment, and then Henson died suddenly of basically a lung infection in 1990. So it was kind of his last film. It has a huge, however, cult following these days. We're gonna be looking here at Labyrinth. So a lot of people know this. It's a musical fantasy. It's a very, very simple story. What this is known for is, besides the music, because this is David Bowie here, the actress I think is Jennifer Connelly. Her character is about 16 in this film. And basically this young girl, she's sick of her baby brother, Toby, and she's reading this book and she kind of half-heartedly wishes the Goblin King, Jareth, to come and take him away. So he does. And she has 13 hours to solve his labyrinth, or her little brother is going to become a goblin forever. So that's the basis of the plot of the story, is she is trying to solve this labyrinth and save her baby brother from becoming a goblin. And she meets a creature by the name of Hoggle, who is actually sent there he works for Jareth and is sent there to try to dissuade her, only he likes her and he's confused. He's trying to obey his master because his master can torment him, and yet he likes this sweet girl and he doesn't want to hurt her. So he gets into trouble. He actually gives her a peach at one point in time that sends her into a trance, where you have this whole very interesting little dream sequence where Jareth is singing to her and there's a giant masquerade ball, and it's interesting. Again, it's David Bowie singing and trying to enchant this young girl. And she breaks out of it, and she falls into a junkyard, and then some goblin creature tries to coax her into believing she's in her bedroom and trying to stall her because she only has 13 hours to rescue her little brother. And she escapes, and there's various other adventures. She interacts with a puppet by the name of Sir Didymus and his dog, I believe Ambrosia. He's actually a small dog himself. A giant creature by the name of what on earth is that thing? Lundo, which is a giant monster. Hoggle is actually voiced by, and puppeted to an extent by Hanson's son, Brian. And there's actually somebody in the costume. So, and they kind of going back and forth trying to get through this labyrinth. She eventually gets to the Goblin City, breaks through the Goblin City, and then she has another weird, well, she's not singing. David Bowie's character, Jareth, is singing and trying to, again, entice her, make her love him, convince her to forget her baby brother. And in the beginning of the film, she's reading this book, and she can't remember this final line that it's like I can never remember this line. And she finally does. It's like, you have no power over me. And that's kind of the basis. That's great. That when she remembers this and says this line out loud, it breaks the spell. She's basically, I think, I don't know if the thing actually cites the entire thing. But she has this basically specific lines that she says, and it ends with the one she can't remember, which basically he has no power. And that breaks the spell, and her brother are essentially sent home. And her little brother little half brother Toby is safe, and then she sees her friends in the mirror, and she misses all of them, and I think they show up in her room. And you do see some of like this. She has a stuffed Hoggle and various toy representations of her friend creatures. And of course, she also has a teddy bear that she'd been hoarding to an extent to it. It was an old childhood toy of hers, and she gives it to her brother almost like an acceptance. She doesn't actually hate her baby brother, and she loves him. And that's kind of the basis of this film. It's not so much the story, it's Henson's creature shop, it's the music, and it's the scenery of this very confusing periodic dream sequence, very odd. It's a very odd movie. There's a lot of it gets a little confusing, and again, you have a giant stinking bog that like smells horrible. Lundo can summon rocks. You have a small dog riding a large dog. Rocks make noise. Things fart. It can be very funny, and then of course you have tiny little creepy looking goblins, because it's the creature shop. I mean, that's what it's known for, and that's why it has a cult following. Once people relook at it, it didn't do well in the box office, but once people stop and relook at it, they fall in love. That's the reason you can still find copies of it. I wouldn't be reviewing it if you can't still find copies of it, because it's now become a beloved classic. And again, it was one of Henson's, I think it was his last film that he did. So, yeah, it was, and admittedly, it was executive produced by George Lucas. So, but yeah, trying to think, this looks like his last film. It was directed by Henson. Yeah, and it did not do well. I'm skimming the IMDb page. It had a mixed critical response, but upon its release. But over the years, it has been reevaluated by critics and gained a large cult following. So let's see. You have the basic plot. You have all sorts of, the IMDb page basically lists the puppetry and the voices. So, and then let's see. There's a lot of information, and it's a great film. It's fun, it's weird, it's bizarre, but it was also, I mean, it was one of Henson's last films, and he was an amazing, I mean, he was an amazing creator. He was an amazing artist. I mean, Kermit the Frog is legendary. These creatures, I mean, even these have become cult followings. The Dark Crystal, which the Henson, I think they still own. They didn't sell them. They sold the Muppets to a German company, which eventually sold them to Disney, which sucks. And then, of course, Lucas sold his soul to Disney because he was an idiot and didn't realize he was apparently dealing with the root of all evil, also known as Disney. I'm not fond of Disney. Thankfully, this is still owned, as far as I know, by Henson Corporation, or the Creature Shop. So his family, Henson's, it's Henson or Henson. Oh, you think my brain would work? I have a toddler who periodically doesn't sleep. My brain doesn't always work. It's Jim Henson. Mispronouncing there. But they still own this. I think they still own the Dark Crystal. I think they own Fraggle Rock as well. So that's what they still own. They still own this. And it's a beloved cult classic. It's very weird. I admit it's very weird. It's a fantasy rock opera to an extent. So age-wise, it's kind of hard to pick. It's a little dark. It's a little confusing. You have to like David Bowie music. Otherwise, you're not going to like this, because he has 2 huge musical numbers in this thing. Both of them are very confusing. It's very dream sequence-y. It's a very interesting film. It's fun. It's entertaining. I don't think elementary school kids would like this. If your kids, even late middle school, late elementary, get scared easily, I wouldn't. There's some creepy creatures in this thing. And things that jump out at you because, again, it's a labyrinth and it's goblins. So teenagers would probably find this interesting, particularly if you ever listen to some David Bowie music. They might roll their eyes at it. If you're looking at like film studies, it would probably be particularly special effects, practical special effects. It'd be something good to look at. It's a good representation of that type of thing and the puppetry. So if you like it, I mean, a lot of parents who are watching this is a part of our childhood. Jim Henson was a part of most of our lives. If you want to, it's like, look, you saw Sesame Street. The same guy who kind of created these things also created these things. Don't watch The Dark Crystal. I haven't seen that in a while, but again, it's creepy. I don't think I may review it if I ever see it again. But again, this is a good film. Late middle school would probably be the youngest. Otherwise, little kids might get really, really confused by this, and that's iffy. Middle school to high school would be more the range of this. It's an entertaining watch. It's not really scary. It's just some of the puppetry is creepy. And David Bowie singing and trying to enhance a teenage girl is kind of weird and slightly creepy and fun because it's just kind of bizarre, and it's a fantasy film that makes no sense. Essentially, the main plot is this girl is trying to break through this labyrinth to get her baby brother back from a Goblin King who wants to turn him into a goblin and is swearing he's in love with her, and she has to escape that, and kind of accept that she's grown up and she still loves her baby brother. He's her half brother because I think her mother had died. It doesn't go into the details on that. So, and her and David Bowie are the only real humans in this. You see her father and her stepmother a little bit, but not much. So that's what this is. This is an old library copy that I bought back when I was working and they were getting rid of it. So I decided to buy it and bring it home. So, because it's something I'll probably show my kids at some point. But it's confusing. It's fun, but yeah, it's a very bizarre 90s kind of fantasy musical that has a very simple plot and is based mostly on the great creature work of an amazing artist and all his people and his creature shop. So that's really it for this review. There's not much to Labyrinth. It's a cult classic and just kind of amazing puppetry in there. There's probably some, if you look into, there's probably some various anniversary editions that have more of the stuff of how these things are done, which is something if you're studying film studies and looking at practical effects and stuff like that, or if you're a David Bowie fan and want to introduce your child to nostalgia. We can always do that. We can introduce our children to our own nostalgia. It's fun, and again, this movie makes very little sense and is just kind of entertaining. The educational value has to do with the practical effects, and this legend of a creator that died like maybe 5 years later. Sadly, we lost a great artist in there, though I think his son is pretty good as well. So that's really it for this review. If you like this review, like and subscribe. I do a lot of children's book reviews and kind of teen film reviews of various not really nostalgic, though I do various ones that I remember, and educational film reviews. Mostly it's family stuff. The cornerstone of this channel is book reviews and family film reviews. It is a homeschooling channel, so that's the reason I address people who are basically teaching kids at home. We are not religious, so that is kind of what this channel is. If you have not seen the rest of my stuff, if you like this review, I have a bunch of book reviews. I'm covering Harry Potter this month and into October. October is packed. I'm doing Dracula and Frankenstein, The Phantom of the Opera, all of the books. I'm covering Bunnicula as well. Hocus Pocus is one of the films. Is Casper, some 90s Halloween-y films, some fun stuff, some dark stuff. November does a mixture of Native American stuff, and then I'm covering, Tamora Pierce's The Circle Opens Quartet. I'm covering her Circle of Magic Quartet this month. So that's what goes on. I typically do about 3 films a week unless I'm doing something special. So I do I do films on Friday, I do books on Monday. So I also have a bunch of other book reviews, film reviews, some homeschooling videos, a little bit of kids travel stuff as well. If you want to check that out and like and subscribe, I have a lot more coming. Thank you.